The button box. The button box is sort of an accidental book, like my biography on Charles Taz Russell. When I first started researching Russell, I really didn't think I'd end up writing a biography about him. I was just curious to find out what he was all about, who he was. In the case of the button box, by the way, that button box on the front cover is the very button box my grandfather brought to my grandmother on the first night that he met her and decided he would try to woo her. At any rate, the button box began at the moment. I can't remember not being curious about my roots, my family. What was my grandfather and grandmother like as kids? What were their parents like? What was it like to grow up in Poland? What was it like to have so many brothers and sisters? So what was it like to fall in love with each other? Was Grandpa a good kisser? Do you like all of the daughters-in-law that your sons have brought home, or all the sons-in-law your daughters brought home, or what kind of mischief happened on the farm when the kids were all little, or what kind of mischief did my dad get into? Questions. It used to drive her crazy. And then somebody had lived in the house after Veronica and Emery lived in that house that Grandma finally moved into. Somebody had left an old-fashioned wire recorder in the attic. You know, we recorded on a wire before we had tape. So I recorded a few sessions with Grandma. She was so reluctant. And I have bits and pieces of those. And then I started doing it on a reel-to-reel, Sony later, because I wanted to record her stories to have sort of an oral history of the family. Still wasn't thinking of a book, really. And then I started using, those little cassette things you could carry. And by that time, she was so used to talking with me. And she was used to talking with me anyway. I spent my life at her house. I mean, other teenage boys, go out with other teenage boys and play soccer or something. I went over to Grandma's and cleaned the chicken coop and watched TV and ate cookies. Played Beatrice K records and crap like that. She loved Beatrice K. I finally figured out that eventually I would do a book because I knew my cousins would have kids, and I never thought about it being. I thought of it as a little book that you might run off on a mimeograph machine or something and pass out to all your relatives. And then later the whole idea of it being a book. And then my publisher years and years ago said, that a book like that will appeal to lots of people besides your family, because lots of people have grandmothers, and that's a turn of the century situation, and there's a lot of humor in these stories and a lot of pathos. And so I finally put it together, and I wish almost that I hadn't moved to Nebraska when I did. There's a picture of Grandma and I that day I actually finalized my life in Washington because the interviews stopped then. And there was so much more happened in the family that I would love to have had her opinions. And, of course, later in life I found out things about the family, like my grandfather and his brothers did jail time for the murder of their landlord, who found out that the three of them, were having an affair with his wife that my grandmother didn't talk about. She talked about a lot of things, and she wasn't afraid to talk about dirty laundry. But there were some things she would just avoid or skip, like I asked, how I knew Grandpa had run-ins with the law. Hell, he had ran a whorehouse, maybe two of them. And I said, how close were his encounters with the law? And she said, sometimes very close, but she said everything turned out all right. So, of course, she said it with a Polish accent. Everything turns out all right, Freddy. Yeah. Well, at any rate, so it's a book now, and I was afraid some family would be hurt because Grandma wasn't afraid to talk about people who hurt her and why she was hurt. But she was a very forgiving woman. She forgave everyone, even a son who betrayed her in one of the worst ways. So an unusual kind of gal, my grandma. I don't know what I'm going to do with that button box. I have to leave it to somebody. I hope you enjoy the book.